Chapter 5, Part 2 of the 8 Strokes of the Clock. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lenny. The 8 Strokes of the Clock by Maurice Leblanc. Chapter 5, Part 2. It was at this moment that the motor car containing the examining magistrate and the public prosecutor pulled up outside the chalets. Rénine, who did not expect them until later, said to Hortense, "We must be quick. On no account leave Madame d'Ormeval." Word was sent up to the persons whose evidence might be of any service that they were to go to the beach, where the magistrate was beginning a preliminary investigation. He would call on Madame d'Ormeval afterwards. Accordingly, all who were present left the chalet. No one remained behind, except the 2 guards and Germaine Astaing. Germaine knelt down for the last time beside the dead man, and, bending low, with her face in her hands, prayed for a long time. Then she rose, and was opening the door on the landing, when Rénine came forward. "I should like a few words with you, madame." She seemed surprised, and replied, "What is it, monsieur? I am listening." "Not here." "Where then, monsieur?" "Next door, in the sitting-room." "No," she said sharply. "Why not? Though you did not even shake hands with her, I presume that Madame d'Ormeval is your friend?" He gave her no time to reflect, drew her into the next room, closed the door, and, at once pouncing upon Madame d'Ormeval, who was trying to go out and return to her own room, said, "No, madame, listen, I implore you. Madame Astaing's presence need not drive you away. We have very serious matters to discuss, without losing a minute." The 2 women, standing face to face, were looking at each other with the same expression of implacable hatred, in which might be read the same confusion of spirit and the same restrained anger. Hortense, who believed them to be friends, and who might, up to a certain point, have believed them to be accomplices, foresaw with terror the hostile encounter which she felt to be inevitable. She compelled Madame d'Ormeval to resume her seat, while Rénine took up his position in the middle of the room, and spoke in resolute tones. "Chance, which has placed me in possession of part of the truth, will enable me to save you both, if you are willing to assist me with a frank explanation that will give me the particulars which I still need. Each of you knows the danger in which she stands, because each of you is conscious in her heart of the evil for which she is responsible. But you are carried away by hatred, and it is for me to see clearly and to act. The examining magistrate will be here in half an hour. By that time, you must have come to an agreement." They both started, as though offended by such a word. "Yes, an agreement," he repeated, in a more imperious tone. "Whether you like it or not, you will come to an agreement. You are not the only ones to be considered. There are your 2 little daughters, Madame d'Ormeval. Since circumstances have set me in their path, I am intervening in their defense and for their safety. A blunder, a word too much, and they are ruined. That must not happen." At the mention of her children, Madame d'Ormeval broke down and sobbed. Germaine Astaing shrugged her shoulders and made a movement towards the door. Rénine once more blocked the way. "Where are you going?" "I have been summoned by the examining magistrate." "No, you have not." "Yes, I have, just as all those have been who have any evidence to give. You were not on the spot. You know nothing of what happened. Nobody knows anything of the murder." "I know who committed it." "That's impossible." "It was Therese d'Ormeval." The accusation was hurled forth in an outburst of rage and with a fiercely threatening gesture. "You wretched creature!" exclaimed Madame d'Ormeval, rushing at her. "Go! Leave the room! Oh, what a wretch the woman is!" Hortense was trying to restrain her, but Rénine whispered, "Let them be. It's what I wanted. To pitch them one against the other, and so to let in the daylight." Madame Astaing had made a convulsive effort to ward off the insult with a jest, and she sniggered. "A wretched creature? Why? Because I have accused you?" "Why? For every reason. You're a wretched creature. You hear what I say, Germaine? You're a wretch!" Therese d'Ormeval was repeating the insult, as though it afforded her some relief. Her anger was abating. Very likely, also, she no longer had the strength to keep up the struggle. And it was Madame Astaing who returned to the attack, with her fists clenched and her face distorted and suddenly aged by fully 20 years. You dare to insult me! You, after the murder you have committed! You dare to lift up your head when the man whom you killed is lying in there on his deathbed! Ah, if one of us is a wretched creature, it's you, Therese, and you know it. You have killed your husband. You have killed your husband!" She leapt forward, in the excitement of the terrible words which she was uttering, and her fingernails were almost touching her friend's face. "Oh, don't tell me you didn't kill him!" she cried. "Don't say that! I won't let you. Don't say it! The dagger is there, in your bag. My brother felt it while he was talking to you, and his hand came out with stains of blood upon it. Your husband's blood, Therese. And then, even if I had not discovered anything, do you think that I should not have guessed in the first few minutes? Why, I knew the truth at once, Therese. When a sailor down there answered, 'Monsieur d'Ormeval, he has been murdered,' I said to myself then and there, 'It's she, it's Therese, she killed him!'" Therese did not reply. She had abandoned her attitude of protest. Hortense, who was watching her with anguish, thought that she could perceive in her the despondency of those who know themselves to be lost. Her cheeks had fallen in, and she wore such an expression of despair that Hortense, moved to compassion, implored her to defend herself. "Please, please, explain things. When the murder was committed, you were here, on the balcony. But then the dagger, how did you come to have it? How do you explain it?" "Explanations!" sneered Germaine Astaing. "How could she possibly explain? What do outward appearances matter? What does it matter what anyone saw or did not see? The proof is the thing that tells. The dagger is there, in your bag, Therese. That's a fact. Yes, it was you who did it. You killed him. You killed him in the end. How often I've told my brother, she will kill him yet. Frederic used to try to defend you. He always had a weakness for you. But in his innermost heart he foresaw what would happen. And now the horrible thing has been done. A stab in the back. Coward! Coward! And you would have me say nothing? Why, I didn't hesitate a moment. Nor did Frederic. We looked for proofs at once. And I've denounced you of my own free will, perfectly well aware of what I was doing. And it's over, Therese. You're done for. Nothing can save you now. The dagger is in that bag which you are clutching in your hand. The magistrate is coming. And the dagger will be found, stained with the blood of your husband. So will your pocketbook. They're both there, and they will be found." Her rage had incensed her so vehemently that she was unable to continue, and stood with her hand outstretched and her chin twitching with nervous tremors. Rénine gently took hold of Madame d'Ormeval's bag. She clung to it, but he insisted and said, "Please allow me, madame. Your friend Germaine is right. The examining magistrate will be here presently, and the fact that the dagger and the pocketbook are in your possession will lead to your immediate arrest. This must not happen. Please allow me." His insinuating voice diminished Therese d'Ormeval's resistance. She released her fingers, one by one. He took the bag, opened it, produced a little dagger with an ebony handle and a grey leather pocketbook, and quietly slipped the two into the inside pocket of his jacket. Germaine Astaing gazed at him in amazement. "You're mad, monsieur! What right have you—" "These things must not be left lying about. I shall not worry now. The magistrate will never look for them in my pocket." "But I shall denounce you to the police!" she exclaimed indignantly. "They shall be told." No, he said, laughing. "You won't say anything. The police have nothing to do with this. The quarrel between you must be settled in private. What an idea! To go dragging the police into every incident of one's life!" Madame Astaing was choking with fury. "But you have no right to talk like this, monsieur. Who are you, after all? A friend of that woman's?" "Since you've been attacking her, yes." "But I'm only attacking her because she's guilty, for you can't deny it. She has killed her husband." "I don't deny it," said Rénine calmly. "We are all agreed on that point. Jacques d'Ormeval was killed by his wife." But I repeat, the police must not know the truth." "They shall know it through me, monsieur. I swear they shall. That woman must be punished. She has committed murder." Rénine went up to her and, touching her on the shoulder: "You asked me just now by what right I was interfering. And you yourself, madame?" "I was a friend of Jacques d'Ormeval." "Only a friend?" She was a little taken aback, but at once pulled herself together and replied: "I was his friend, and it is my duty to avenge his death." "Nevertheless, you will remain silent, as he did." "He did not know when he died." "That's where you are wrong. He could have accused his wife, if he had wished. He had ample time to accuse her, and he said nothing. Why? Because of his children." Mme. Astaing was not appeased, and her attitude displayed the same longing for revenge and the same detestation. But she was influenced by Rénine in spite of herself. In the small, closed room, where there was such a clash of hatred, he was gradually becoming the master. And Germaine Astaing understood that it was against him that she had to struggle, while Madame d'Ormeval felt all the comfort of that unexpected support which was offering itself on the brink of the abyss. "Thank you, monsieur," she said. "As you have seen all this so clearly, you also know that it was for my children's sake that I did not give myself up. But for that, I am so tired." And so the scene was changing and things assuming a different aspect. Thanks to a few words let fall in the midst of the dispute, the culprit was lifting her head and taking heart, whereas her accuser was hesitating and seemed to be uneasy. And it also came about that the accuser dared not say anything further, and that the culprit was nearing the moment at which the need is felt of breaking silence and of speaking, quite naturally, words that are at once a confession and a relief. "The time, I think, has come," said Rénine to Therese, with the same unvarying gentleness, "when you can and ought to explain yourself." She was again weeping, lying huddled in a chair. She too revealed a face aged and ravaged by sorrow. And, in a very low voice, with no display of anger, she spoke, in short, broken sentences. "She has been his mistress for the last 4 years. I can't tell you how I suffered. She herself told me of it, out of sheer wickedness. Her loathing for me was even greater than her love for Jacques. And every day I had some fresh injury to bear. She would ring me up to tell me of her appointments with my husband. She hoped to make me suffer so much I should end by killing myself. I did think of it sometimes, but I held out, for the children's sake. Jacques was weakening. She wanted him to get a divorce. And little by little he began to consent, dominated by her and by her brother, who is slyer than she is, but quite as dangerous. I felt all this. Jacques was becoming harsh to me. He had not the courage to leave me. But I was the obstacle, and he bore me a grudge. Heavens, the tortures I suffered!" "You should have given him his liberty," cried Germaine Astaing. "A woman doesn't kill her husband for wanting a divorce." Therese shook her head and answered: "I did not kill him because he wanted a divorce. If he had really wanted it, he would have left me. And what could I have done? But your plans had changed, Germaine. Divorce was not enough for you. And it was something else that you would have obtained from him, another, much more serious thing, which you and your brother had insisted on, and to which he had consented, out of cowardice, in spite of himself." "What do you mean?" spluttered Germaine. "What other thing?" "My death." "You lie!" cried Madame Astaing. Therese did not raise her voice. She made not a movement of aversion or indignation, and simply repeated: "My death, Germaine. I have read your latest letters, 6 letters from you, which he was foolish enough to leave about in his pocket-book, and which I read last night. 6 letters, in which the terrible word is not set down, but in which it appears between every line. I trembled as I read it. That Jacques should come to this! Nevertheless, the idea of stabbing him did not occur to me for a second. A woman like myself, Germaine, does not readily commit murder. If I lost my head, it was after that, and it was your fault." She turned her eyes to Rénine, as if to ask him if there was no danger in her speaking and revealing the truth. "Don't be afraid," he said. "I will be answerable for everything." She drew her hand across her forehead. The horrible scene was being reenacted within her and was torturing her. Germaine Astaing did not move, but stood with folded arms and anxious eyes, while Hortense Daniel sat distractedly awaiting the confession of the crime and the explanation of the unfathomable mystery. "It was after that, and it was through your fault, Germaine. I had put back the pocket-book in a drawer where it was hidden, and I said nothing to Jacques this morning. I did not want to tell him what I knew. It was too horrible. All the same, I had to act quickly. Your letters announced your secret arrival today. I thought at first of running away, of taking the train. I had mechanically picked up that dagger to defend myself. But when Jacques and I went down to the beach, I was resigned. Yes, I had accepted death. I will die, I thought, and put an end to all this nightmare. Only, for the children's sake, I was anxious that my death should look like an accident, and that Jacques should have no part in it. That was why your plan of a walk on the cliff suited me. A fall from the top of a cliff seems quite natural. Jacques therefore left me to go to his cabin, from which he was to join you later at the Trois Mathildes. On the way below the terrace, he dropped the key of the cabin. I went down and began to look for it with him. And it happened then, through your fault. Yes, Germaine, through your fault. Jacques' pocket-book had slipped from his jacket, without his noticing it. And together with the pocket-book, a photograph, which I recognized at once. A photograph taken this year, of myself and my 2 children. I picked it up, and I saw... You know what I saw, Germaine? Instead of my face, the face in the photograph was yours. You had put in your likeness, Germaine, and blotted me out. It was your face. One of your arms was round my elder daughter's neck, and the younger was sitting on your knees. It was you, Germaine, the wife of my husband, the future mother of my children. You who were going to bring them up. You! Then I lost my head. I had a dagger. Jacques was stooping. I stabbed him. Every word of her confession was strictly true. Those who listened to her felt this profoundly, and nothing could have given Hortense and Rénine a keener impression of tragedy. She had fallen back into her chair, utterly exhausted. Nevertheless, she went on speaking unintelligible words, and it was only gradually, by leaning over her, that they were able to make out. I thought that there would be an outcry, and that I should be arrested, but no. It happened in such a way, and under such conditions, that no one had seen anything. Further, Jacques had drawn himself up at the same time as myself, and he actually did not fall. No, he did not fall. I had stabbed him, and he remained standing. I saw him from the terrace, to which I had returned. He had hung his jacket over his shoulders, evidently to hide his wound, and he moved away without staggering, or staggering so little that I alone was able to perceive it. He even spoke to some friends who were playing cards. Then he went to his cabin and disappeared. In a few moments I came back indoors. I was persuaded that all of this was only a bad dream, that I had not killed him, or that at the worst the wound was a slight one. Jacques would come out again, I was certain of it. I watched from my balcony. If I had thought for a moment that he needed assistance, I should have flown to him. But truly I didn't know. I didn't guess. People speak of presentiments. There are no such things. I was perfectly calm, just as one is after a nightmare of which the memory is fading away. No, I swear to you, I knew nothing, until the moment... She interrupted herself, stifled by sobs. Rénine finished her sentence for her. Until the moment when they came and told you, I suppose. Therese stammered, yes. It was not till then that I was conscious of what I had done, and I felt that I was going mad, and that I should cry out to all those people, "Why, it was I who did it! Don't search! Here is the dagger! I am the culprit!" Yes, I was going to say that, when suddenly I caught sight of my poor Jacques. They were carrying him along. His face was very peaceful, very gentle. And in his presence I understood my duty, as he had understood his. He had kept silent for the sake of the children. I would be silent too. We were both guilty of the murder of which he was the victim, and we must both do all we could to prevent the crime from recoiling upon them. He had seen this clearly in his dying agony. He had had the amazing courage to keep his feet, to answer the people who spoke to him, and to lock himself up to die. He had done this, wiping out all his faults with a single action, and in so doing had granted me his forgiveness, because he was not accusing me, and was ordering me to hold my peace and to defend myself against everybody, especially against you, Germaine. She uttered these last words more firmly. At first wholly overwhelmed by the unconscious act which she had committed in killing her husband, she had recovered her strength a little in thinking of what she had done and in defending herself with such energy. Faced by the intriguing woman whose hatred had driven both of them to death and crime, she clenched her fists, ready for the struggle, all quivering with resolution. Germaine Astaing did not flinch. She had listened without a word, with a relentless expression which grew harder and harder as Therese's confession became more precise. No emotion seemed to soften her, and no remorse to penetrate her being. At most, towards the end, her thin lips shaped themselves into a faint smile. She was holding her prey in her clutches. Slowly, with her eyes raised to a mirror, she adjusted her hat and powdered her face. Then she walked to the door. Therese darted forward. "Where are you going?" "Where I choose." "To see the examining magistrate?" "Very likely." "He shall not pass." "As you please. I'll wait for him here." "And you'll tell him what?" "Why, all that you have said, of course." "All that you have been silly enough to say. How could he doubt the story? You have explained it all to me so fully." Therese took her by the shoulders. "Yes, but I'll explain other things to him at the same time, Germaine. Things that concern you. If I'm ruined, so shall you be. You can't touch me. I can expose you, show your letters." "What letters?" "Those in which my death was decided on." "Lies, Therese. You know that famous plot exists only in your imagination. Neither Jacques nor I wished for your death." "You did, at any rate. Your letters condemn you." "Lies. They were the letters of a friend to a friend." "Letters of a mistress to her paramour." "Prove it." "They are there in Jacques' pocket-book." "No, they're not." "What's that you say?" "I say that those letters belong to me. I've taken them back. Or rather, my brother has." "You've stolen them, you wretch, and you shall give them back again!" cried Therese, shaking her. "I haven't, then. My brother kept them. He has gone." Therese staggered and stretched out her hands to Rénine with an expression of despair. Rénine said: "What she says is true. I watched the brother's proceedings while he was feeling in your bag. He took out the pocket-book, looked through it with his sister, came and put it back again, and went off with the letters." Rénine paused and added: "Or at least with 5 of them." The two women moved closer to him. What did he intend to convey? If Frederic Astaing had taken away only 5 letters, what had become of the 6th? "I suppose," said Rénine, "that when the pocket-book fell on the shingle, that 6th letter slipped out at the same time as the photograph, and that Monsieur d'Ormeval must have picked it up, for I found it in the pocket of his blazer, which had been hung up near the bed. Here it is. It's signed Germaine Astaing, and it is quite enough to prove the writer's intentions, and the murderous counsels which she was pressing upon her lover." Madame Astaing had turned grey in the face, and was so much disconcerted that she did not try to defend herself. Rénine continued, addressing his remarks to her: "To my mind, madame, you are responsible for all that happened. Penniless, no doubt, and at the end of your resources, you tried to profit by the passion with which you inspired Monsieur d'Ormeval, in order to make him marry you, in spite of all the obstacles, and to lay your hands upon his fortune. I have proofs of this greed for money, and these abominable calculations, and can supply them, if need be. A few minutes after I had felt in the pocket of that jacket, you did the same. I had removed the 6th letter, but had left a slip of paper, which you looked for eagerly, and which also must have dropped out of the pocket-book. It was an uncrossed cheque for 100,000 francs, drawn by Monsieur d'Ormeval in your brother's name. Just a little wedding present, what we might call pin money. Acting on your instructions, your brother dashed off my mother to Le Havre to reach the bank before 4 o'clock. I may as well tell you that he will not have cashed the check, for I had a telephone message sent to the bank to announce the murder of Monsieur d'Ormeval, which stops all the payments. The upshot of all this is that the police, if you persist in your schemes of revenge, will have in their hands all the proofs that are wanted against you and your brother. I might add, as an edifying piece of evidence, the story of the conversation which I overheard between your brother and yourself in a dining car on the railway between Brest and Paris a fortnight ago. But I feel sure that you will not drive me to adopt these extreme measures, and that we understand each other. Isn't that so? Natures like Madame Astaign's, which are violent and headstrong so long as a fight is possible, and while a gleam of hope remains, are easily swayed in defeat. Germaine was too intelligent not to grasp the fact that the least attempt at resistance would be shattered by such an adversary as this. She was in his hands. She could but yield. She therefore did not indulge in any play-acting, nor in any demonstration, such as threats, outbursts of fury or hysterics. She bowed. "We are agreed," she said. "What are your terms?" "Go away. If ever you are called upon for your evidence, say that you know nothing." She walked away. At the door she hesitated, and then, between her teeth, she said, "The check." Rénine looked at Madame d'Ormeval, who declared, "Let her keep it. I would not touch that money." When Rénine had given Therese d'Ormeval precise instructions as to how she was to behave at the enquiry and to answer the questions put to her, he left the chalet, accompanied by Hortense Daniel. On the beach below, the magistrate and the public prosecutor were continuing their investigations, taking measurements, examining the witnesses, and generally laying their heads together. "When I think," said Hortense, "that you have the dagger and Monsieur d'Ormeval's pocket-book on you—" "And it strikes you as awfully dangerous, I suppose?" he said, laughing. "It strikes me as awfully comic." "Aren't you afraid?" "Of what?" "That they may suspect something." "Lord, they won't suspect a thing. We shall tell those good people what we saw, and our evidence will only increase their perplexity, for we saw nothing at all. For prudence sake, we will stay a day or two, to see which way the wind is blowing. But it's quite settled. They will never be able to make head or tail of the matter." "Nevertheless, you guessed the secret, and from the first. Why?" "Because, instead of seeking difficulties where none exist, as people generally do, I always put the question as it should be put, and the solution comes quite naturally. A man goes to his cabin and locks himself in. Half an hour later he is found inside dead. No one has gone in. What has happened? To my mind, there is only one answer. There is no need to think about it. As the murder was not committed in the cabin, it must have been committed beforehand, and the man was already mortally wounded when he entered his cabin. And forthwith the truth in this particular case appeared to me. Madame d'Ormeval, who was to have been killed this evening, forestalled her murderers, and while her husband was stooping to the ground, in a moment of frenzy stabbed him in the back. There was nothing left to do but look for the reasons that prompted her action. When I knew them, I took her part unreservedly. That's the whole story." The day was beginning to wane. The blue of the sky was becoming darker, and the sea even more peaceful than before. "What are you thinking of?" asked Rénine after a moment. "I am thinking," she said, "that if I too were the victim of some machination, I should trust you whatever happened, trust you through and against all. I know, as certainly as I know that I exist, that you would save me, whatever the obstacles might be. There is no limit to the power of your will." He said very softly, "There is no limit to my wish to please you." End of Chapter 5, Part 2.